Rain hammered against the 12th floor windows with fury, as if San Francisco's sky wanted to warn her that coming back is never innocent. Victoria Hayes gripped the handle of her leather briefcase until her knuckles turned white. From inside the elevator, she stared at the closed steel doors, feeling each second bring her closer to a past she had sworn to bury. Today was her first day as director of operations at Morrison Group, the same company she had abandoned 7 years ago, devastated, swearing never to return. The elevator bell chimed, the doors opened, and there she was, standing by the reception desk, wearing an impeccable gray blazer and chestnut hair pulled back in a low bun that exposed the delicate curve of her neck. Emily Rivers held a tablet against her chest like a shield. Her eyes, those same honey-colored eyes Victoria had dreamed about for years, lifted and met hers. The world stopped. The office murmur, the rain's drumming, the air conditioning's hum, everything vanished. Emily went pale. The tablet nearly slipped from her hands. Victoria felt the air escape her lungs. No, this can't be. "Good morning, Ms. Hayes," said a male voice beside her. It was David Foster, the human resources manager, with a professional smile plastered on his face. "Welcome back to Morrison Group. Let me introduce you to your executive assistant, Emily Rivers. She'll be in charge of coordinating your entire schedule and..." Victoria wasn't listening. She only saw Emily, motionless, lips parted as if wanting to say something, but the words had gotten trapped in her throat. 7 years. 7 years since that night in Golden Gate Park, when Emily had taken her hand beneath the cherry blossoms and whispered, "I love you," with eyes full of tears. 7 years since she had disappeared without a call, without a message, without an explanation, as if Victoria had never existed. And now she was here, her secretary. Before continuing with this story that will break your heart, if you want to know what really happened between Victoria and Emily, and why this reunion will change everything, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell. Because what's coming, there's no turning back. "Nice to meet you," Victoria murmured, extending her hand with a coldness she didn't feel. Her voice sounded firmer than expected, almost professional. Inside, she was a hurricane. Emily lowered her gaze before shaking her hand. The contact lasted barely a second, but Victoria felt the electric current run up her arm, exactly like 7 years ago. Emily's skin was still soft, her fingers long and delicate. When they let go, Emily pulled her hand to her side as if she had just touched fire. "The pleasure is mine, Ms. Hayes," Emily responded in a thread of voice without looking up. I'll make sure your transition is as smooth as possible." David didn't seem to notice anything strange. He continued talking about organizational charts, monthly reports, and the board meetings scheduled for Friday. Victoria nodded mechanically, but her mind was trapped in the almost imperceptible tremor in Emily's hands, in how she avoided looking at her directly, in how her breathing had become irregular. "Emily, please show Ms. Hayes to her office," David ordered before walking away down the hall. They were left alone. The silence between them was so dense that Victoria could almost touch it. Outside, the storm intensified. Lightning illuminated San Francisco's gray sky, that heavy September gray that always threatened never to stop. "This way," Emily said, turning on her heels. Her voice was tense, controlled. She walked toward the hallway without waiting for a response. Victoria followed her, observing every detail that time hadn't erased. The way Emily moved her hands when walking, the rhythm of her steps, the upright posture of her shoulders. She even wore the same perfume, jasmine and vanilla, that she used to wear when they met in secret, when the world couldn't know what they felt. Victoria's office was at the end of the hallway, a corner with windows overlooking the entire city. It was spacious, modern, with dark mahogany furniture and a breathtaking view of Golden Gate Park in the distance. Ironic. The same place where everything had begun, and where everything had ended. Emily opened the door and stepped aside. "Your office, Ms. Hayes. I've prepared the files for current projects on your desk, if you need anything else." "Emily," Victoria couldn't contain herself. The word came out as a hoarse whisper, loaded with 7 years of unanswered questions. Emily froze. Her eyes closed briefly, as if just hearing her name on Victoria's lips caused her physical pain. "Please, don't," she murmured without turning around. "Not here." "Not here?" Victoria repeated, feeling anger beginning to climb through her chest. "And where, Emily? Where is it okay to talk about this? Because 7 years ago you left without saying anything. Nothing. You left me waiting for you at that cafe and Ms. Hayes." Emily turned abruptly, and for the first time their eyes truly met. There were contained tears in them, but also something else. Fear. "I didn't know you were coming back. When they hired me 3 months ago, no one mentioned your name. No one said the new director would be you. And what does that change?" Victoria asked, taking a step toward her. "Would you have resigned? Would you have run away again?" Emily pressed her lips together. A tear rolled down her cheek, but she wiped it away angrily. "I have no right to run from anything," she whispered. "And you have no idea why I left. Then tell me." Victoria felt her own voice breaking. "Tell me why you disappeared. Tell me why you let me believe everything we lived was a lie." The silence stretched between them like an open wound. Outside, thunder shook the windows. Emily breathed deeply, trying to compose herself. "I can't," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "Not here. Not now." She backed toward the door. "Welcome to Morrison Group, Ms. Hayes. If you need me, I'll be at my desk." And she left. Closing the door softly behind her, Victoria stood motionless, looking at the empty space where Emily had been standing. Her hands trembled. Her heart beat so loudly she could hear it in her ears. She approached the window and pressed her forehead against the cold glass, watching the blurred city under the rain. What the hell just happened? For 7 years, she had built walls around her heart. She had left San Francisco devastated, studied an MBA in Boston, worked to exhaustion in New York, had empty relationships with women who never touched what Emily had touched. She had believed she was finally ready to return, that the past no longer had power over her. But it took 5 minutes. 5 minutes for everything to burn again. She dropped into the leather chair at her new desk and closed her eyes. Memories came in waves. Emily laughing in that cafe in the Mission District, their hands intertwined under the table. Emily kissing her for the first time in the car, with ragged breathing and eyes full of fear and desire. Emily telling her, "I never thought I could feel this for someone." Emily disappearing. She opened her eyes and looked at the perfectly organized files on her desk. Emily's handwriting on the sticky labels. Neat, delicate, familiar. This is going to be hell. The rest of the day was a blur of introductions, meetings, and new faces Victoria immediately forgot. She smiled when she should, nodded at the right moments, took notes she wouldn't remember later. But every time she looked up, she saw Emily on the other side of her office glass, sitting at her desk, gaze fixed on her computer screen. She never looked at her directly, but Victoria knew she was aware of her every movement. At 6 in the evening, when the offices began to empty, Victoria was still reviewing documents without really reading them. She heard footsteps approaching her door. A soft knock. "Come in," she said, without looking up. The door opened. Victoria looked up and found Emily standing in the doorway, her bag hanging from her shoulder, and a carefully neutral expression. "I came to say goodbye, Ms. Hayes. It's late. If you don't need anything else." Victoria set her pen on the desk. "Emily, yes?" "Tomorrow at 8. I want to review all active projects with you. I need to get up to speed as soon as possible." Emily nodded. "Of course. Good night, Ms. Hayes." "Good night, Emily." When the door closed, Victoria exhaled a sigh she didn't know she was holding. She stood and walked to the window. The rain had ceased, leaving San Francisco's streets shiny and wet under the city lights. In the distance, Golden Gate Park's lights flickered among the trees. She took out her cell phone and looked at the screen. She had several messages from her sister, from her former colleagues in New York, from her mother asking how her first day had been. She didn't answer any of them. Instead, she opened the Photos app and scrolled back, 7 years back, to a folder she hadn't deleted despite promising herself 1,000 times. There it was, a photo of her and Emily taken on a bench in the park, with cherry blossoms blooming behind them. Emily was laughing, her head resting on Victoria's shoulder. They looked happy. They looked in love. They looked like nothing could separate them. Victoria abruptly closed the app and put away her phone. I have to get over it. I have to be professional. This is just work. But even as she repeated it to herself, she knew it was a lie. Morning came too quickly. Victoria had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Emily, her surprised expression in the elevator, the tremor in her hands, the way she had said, "I have no right to run from anything." What did that mean? Why had she sounded so defeated? At 7 a.m, Victoria was already in the shower of her new apartment in Pacific Heights, letting the hot water try to relieve the tension in her muscles. It didn't work. She dressed carefully. A navy blue suit, white blouse, discreet heels, nothing flashy, nothing that could be interpreted as an attempt to impress anyone, especially not her. She arrived at the offices at 7:30. The building was practically empty, only cleaning staff and some early rising manager. She went up to the 12th floor and found her area deserted. Good. She needed time to prepare. She turned on her computer and began reviewing emails. She forced herself to concentrate on the numbers, on quarterly projections, on pending contracts. But when she heard the elevator sound at 10 to 8, her heart began to race. Footsteps. Heels against the marble floor. Victoria didn't look up from her screen, but her entire body was tense, aware of every sound. She heard Emily arrive at her desk, how she left her bag, how she turned on her computer. Silence. The kind of silence that's loaded with everything unspoken. At exactly 8 o'clock, Emily knocked on her office door. "Come in." Emily entered with a folder under her arm and a cup of coffee in her hand. She looked impeccable, professional, as if the previous night had meant nothing, but Victoria noticed the small signs. The dark circles disguised with makeup, the tension in her shoulders, the way she avoided looking directly into her eyes. "Good morning, Ms. Hayes," Emily said, placing the coffee cup on the desk. "I brought you coffee. No sugar, with a little milk." She stopped abruptly, biting her lip. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have assumed." Victoria looked at the cup. "Just how I like it." Emily still remembered. After 7 years, she still remembered. "Thank you," Victoria said, keeping her voice neutral. "Sit down." Emily sat in the chair across from the desk, crossing her legs and opening the folder on her lap. Her body language was rigid, defensive. "I've prepared a summary of the 5 main projects under her supervision," Emily began. And Victoria noticed the slip. Not her. As if for a second she had forgotten there was now distance between them. "The most urgent is the negotiation with Pacific Industries. The contract expires in 3 weeks and—" "Emily," Victoria interrupted her gently, "before we talk about work, we need to clarify something." Emily visibly tensed. Her fingers gripped the folder. "Ms. Hayes, Don't call me Ms. Hayes when we're alone," Victoria said, surprising herself. "It's uncomfortable. Just Victoria is fine." Emily looked up for the first time that morning. Her honey-colored eyes were full of something Victoria couldn't decipher. Pain? Relief? Fear? "I don't know if that's appropriate," Emily murmured. "We work together. We're going to spend 8 hours a day meters apart." Victoria paused. "We can't pretend we're strangers, but that's exactly what we are now," Emily responded, and there was bitterness in her voice. "Strangers. 7 years have passed, Victoria. You don't know me anymore, and I don't know you. Do you really believe that?" Emily looked away. "I have to believe it." Victoria felt something twist in her chest. She got up from her chair and walked to the window, turning her back to Emily. Outside, San Francisco was beginning to wake. Traffic accumulated on Market Street. Street vendors set up their stalls. The sky tinged orange as the sun tried to break through the gray clouds still remaining from the night's storm. "I didn't sleep last night," Victoria admitted in a low voice. "I stayed awake trying to understand how it's possible you're here, that after all this time, fate put us in the same office, in the same roles that... She stopped, clenching her fists. It's cruel. It's too cruel. She heard Emily stand from her chair. Her footsteps approached slowly. Victoria felt her presence at her back, so close she could perceive her warmth. I didn't sleep either, Emily whispered. And you're right. It's cruel. But Victoria, I can't do this with you. Not again. Victoria turned abruptly. They were less than a meter apart. She could see the small freckles Emily had on the bridge of her nose, the almost imperceptible tremor of her lips, the accelerated pulse in her neck. Do what? Victoria asked. Talk? Clarify things? Finally tell me why you abandoned me? I didn't abandon you, Emily blurted out, and for the first time there was fire in her voice. I protected you. The words hung in the air between them like an unexploded bomb. What did you say? Victoria asked, incredulous. Emily stepped back, bringing her hands to her face. Her shoulders began to shake. I shouldn't have said that. I shouldn't have... Her voice broke. I have to go. No. Victoria took a step toward her, gently taking her arm. You're not going to run this time, Emily. Not again. You owe me an explanation. Emily looked up. There were tears rolling down her cheeks, but there was also an old anger, a wound that had never healed. What do you want me to tell you, Victoria? She asked with a trembling voice. Do you want to know that my father found out about us? That he threatened to destroy you if I didn't leave you? That he told me he would ruin your career? That he would make sure you could never work at any important company in San Francisco? Victoria felt as if the floor was moving beneath her feet. What? She whispered. Your family and mine had been doing business together for years, Emily continued, the words tumbling out now as if she had been holding them for 7 years. My father was one of the main investors in your father's company. When he found out that we... Her voice broke. He told me it was an aberration, that he would never allow his daughter to be that. He gave me an ultimatum. Either I left you and married his partner's son, or he would destroy everything your family had built. Victoria couldn't breathe. Emily's words fell on her like stones, each one heavier than the last. Emily... I didn't finish college, Emily continued, wiping her tears angrily. He pulled me out of classes. He forced me to work at his friends' companies, controlling every aspect of my life. For 2 years, I couldn't leave the house without someone watching me. And when I finally gave in, when I agreed to marry Michael... You got married? Victoria's voice came out as a strangled whisper. Emily nodded, eyes closed. It lasted 8 months. Michael knew the truth. He knew I didn't love him, that I never would. He was a good man. He didn't deserve that. We divorced. My father disowned me. He hasn't spoken to me in 5 years. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria felt her mind couldn't process the information. All this time, she had believed Emily had simply decided she wasn't worth it, that her love hadn't been enough, that she hadn't been enough. But the truth was much worse. Why didn't you tell me? Victoria finally asked, her voice broken. Why didn't you let me fight with you? Because they would have destroyed you, Emily responded, looking at her with desperate eyes. And I wasn't going to allow it. I preferred you hate me, that you believed I had abandoned you, than for you to lose everything because of me. Victoria felt tears rolling down her own cheeks now. She took a step toward Emily, raising her hand to touch her face, but stopped halfway. Emily, A sharp knock on the door made them separate abruptly. Emily quickly wiped her face and stepped back several paces. Victoria cleared her throat, trying to regain composure. Come in, she said with a hoarse voice. David Foster stuck his head in. Good morning, Ms. Hayes. Sorry for the interruption, but the CEO wants to see you in his office. It's about the meeting with Pacific Industries. I'll be right there, Victoria responded. David nodded and closed the door. The silence returned, but now it was different. Now it was loaded with painful truths and lost years. I need to prepare the documents for your meeting, Emily murmured, avoiding her gaze. Excuse me. Emily, wait. But Emily had already left, closing the door softly behind her. Victoria stood in the middle of her office, feeling how everything she thought she knew about the last 7 years was crumbling. Emily hadn't abandoned her. Emily had protected her. Emily had sacrificed her own happiness, her relationship with her father, her future, to save her. And Victoria had hated her for it. She dropped into her chair, covering her face with her hands. Outside, at Emily's desk, she could hear the typing on her computer. Fast, nervous, as if she too was trying to escape from everything she had just confessed. And now what? Victoria thought. How am I supposed to move forward knowing this? But there were no answers, only the weight of truth and the certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. The following days were hell disguised as professionalism. Victoria and Emily moved around each other like two magnets with the same polarity, aware of each movement, but keeping a safe distance. They spoke only about work, formal emails, meetings where Emily took notes without looking up, brief goodbyes at the end of the day. But Victoria watched her, all the time. She noticed how Emily bit her lip when she was concentrated, the same gesture from 7 years ago. How she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous. How sometimes, when she thought no one was watching, she stared out the window with an expression of deep melancholy that broke Victoria's heart. It was Friday afternoon when everything changed again. The meeting with Pacific Industries had been a success. Victoria had managed to renegotiate the contract terms, securing a much more favorable deal for Morrison Group. The CEO, Robert Morrison, a 60-year-old man with silver hair and a perpetual politician's smile, had congratulated her effusively. "I knew I made the right decision bringing you back, Victoria," he had told her, patting her shoulder. "Your father would be proud." Victoria had smiled, but the words had fallen on her like a bucket of cold water. Your father. Robert didn't know. No one at the company knew that Thomas Hayes, the legendary businessman who had helped build Morrison Group, had also been the man whose alliance with Emily's father had destroyed everything. At 6 p.m, when the offices began to empty for the weekend, Victoria called Emily to her office. "Yes, Ms. Victoria?" Emily corrected herself as she entered, with a folder in her hands. "Close the door," Victoria said in a low voice. Emily obeyed, her movements cautious. She stood near the door, as if ready to flee at any moment. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Victoria got up from her desk and walked toward her slowly. Emily instinctively stepped back until her back touched the door. "I need to know something," Victoria said, stopping a meter away. "And I need you to be honest with me." Emily swallowed, her eyes wide. "What do you want to know?" "Why did you come back to San Francisco?" Victoria asked. "After everything that happened with your father, after the divorce, you could have gone anywhere. New York, Los Angeles, even abroad. Why did you come back here?" Emily looked away, her fingers gripping the folder against her chest like a shield. "I needed work," she murmured. "And Morrison Group offered me a good position. Don't lie to me." Victoria's voice was soft but firm. "Not after what you told me the other day." Emily's eyes filled with tears again. She dropped the folder to the floor and covered her face with her hands. "Because I couldn't forget you," she confessed with a broken voice. "Because in 5 years I tried to rebuild my life in Portland. I tried to forget. I tried to move on. But everywhere I went reminded me that you weren't there. And when I saw the job offer in San Francisco, I thought that maybe if I returned to the places where we were happy, I could find some kind of closure, some kind of peace." Victoria felt as if something was breaking inside her chest. "And did you find it?" she whispered. Emily dropped her hands and looked at her directly. There was so much vulnerability in her eyes that Victoria had to make an effort not to approach and hug her. "No," Emily admitted. "I only found more pain. Because every street, every cafe, every corner reminded me of what I lost. What I had to let go. And then you appeared and..." "And what, Emily?" Victoria pressed, taking a step toward her. "And I realized I had never forgotten you," Emily said, tears flowing freely now. "That 7 years weren't enough, that probably a whole lifetime wouldn't be enough." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria could hear her own heart beating in her ears, the distant traffic on the street, Emily's ragged breathing. Outside, San Francisco's sky was beginning to tinge with orange and pink, the sunset painting the clouds with warm colors. Victoria slowly raised her hand, giving Emily time to move away if she wanted. But Emily didn't move. She only closed her eyes when Victoria's fingers brushed her cheek, gently wiping away a tear. "I didn't forget you either," Victoria whispered. "I tried. God knows I tried. But no one made me feel what you made me feel." Emily opened her eyes. They were so close now that Victoria could count each of her eyelashes, see the small golden flecks in her irises. "Victoria, we can't," Emily murmured. But her body said otherwise, subtly leaning toward her. "We work together. This can't." "I know," Victoria interrupted. "I know. But tell me you don't feel this. Tell me you don't feel the air changes when we're in the same room, that your heart doesn't race when our hands accidentally touch. Tell me all this is just in my head and I—" She couldn't finish the sentence because Emily kissed her. It was a desperate kiss, full of 7 years of silence and pain and longing. Emily's hands tangled in her hair, pulling her closer, as if afraid Victoria would disappear. Victoria responded with the same intensity, her arms wrapping around Emily's waist, pressing her against the door. She tasted the same as before, like coffee and broken promises, like everything they had lost, and everything they could have again. When they finally separated, both were breathless. Emily rested her forehead against Victoria's, her eyes closed, her hands still gripping her blouse. "This is a mistake," Emily whispered, but didn't move away. "Probably," Victoria admitted, "but I'm tired of pretending it doesn't matter." Emily opened her eyes and looked at her with a mixture of fear and hope. "And what do we do now?" Victoria had no answer. She only knew she couldn't let her go again. Not this time. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I want to try. If you want to, too." Emily bit her lip, considering it. Finally, she nodded, almost imperceptibly. "I'm scared," she confessed. "Me too," Victoria said, taking her hand. "But I'm more afraid of living the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if we had been brave." A knock on the door made them separate abruptly. Emily quickly wiped her face, trying to compose herself. Victoria cleared her throat and stepped back several paces. "Yes?" she said with a tense voice. The door opened, and Sarah Chen, the marketing manager, appeared with her perpetual enthusiastic smile. "Ms. Hayes, I came to invite you to Friday drinks. The whole team is going to the Embarcadero to celebrate the Pacific Industries contract. Are you in?" Her eyes moved to Emily. "You're coming too, right, Em?" Emily nodded without looking at her. "Of course, Sarah." Sarah clapped. "Perfect. See you downstairs in half an hour." And she left as quickly as she had entered. Victoria and Emily remained in silence, the weight of what had just happened between them suspended in the air. "We should go," Emily finally murmured. "It would be suspicious if we don't." "Yes," Victoria agreed, though the last thing she wanted was to spend the night in a noisy bar pretending normalcy. Emily picked up the folder from the floor and headed to the door. Before leaving, she turned to look at Victoria one last time. There was something different in her eyes now. Something like determination. "Victoria," she said softly. "Yes?" "I don't regret it. What happened? I just wanted you to know." And she left, leaving Victoria with her heart racing and the certainty that everything had just changed. The Embarcadero was one of those typical San Francisco bars. Exposed brick walls, dim lights, indie music playing on the speakers, and the smell of craft beer and cocktails permeating the atmosphere. When Victoria arrived, the Morrison Group crowd already occupied a large table at the back. There were at least 15 people, managers, analysts, assistants, all laughing and toasting. Emily was seated at the end of the table, with a Moscow mule in her hand, chatting with Sarah. When she saw Victoria enter, their eyes met for a second before both looked away. "Ms. Hayes!" David shouted from the other end. "Come on, we have a seat for you." Victoria made her way through the group and sat in a chair that, coincidentally, was 3 seats away from Emily. Far enough to seem casual, close enough that she could see her from the corner of her eye. They brought her an IPA she didn't remember ordering. The group toasted to the new contract, to Victoria, to good times. She smiled and nodded, but her attention was completely focused on Emily. She watched her laugh with Sarah, noticed how she touched her hair when nervous, how her eyes sought Victoria's every few minutes, only to look away quickly when their gazes crossed. It was exquisite torture. "So, Ms. Hayes," said Mark, one of the financial analysts, clearly already with a few drinks in him, "what brought you back to San Francisco? I heard you were crushing it in New York." Victoria took a sip of her beer, considering her response. "I missed the city," she finally said, "and an opportunity came up I couldn't refuse." "And do you have family here?" Sarah asked with curiosity. "Husband, boyfriend, someone?" Victoria felt Emily tense on the other side of the table. "No," Victoria responded calmly. "I'm single. My family is here, but I live alone." "Amazing," Mark commented. "A successful, beautiful, intelligent woman. How is it possible you're single?" "Maybe because I'm more focused on my career than pleasing others' expectations about my personal life," Victoria responded with a cold smile that made Mark shrink in his chair. The group laughed nervously. Sarah elbowed Mark. "That's what you get for being nosy," she told him in a low voice. The conversation drifted to other topics: future projects, office gossip, complaints about traffic. Victoria participated when necessary, but her mind was elsewhere. On the kiss she had shared with Emily barely an hour ago, on her words, "I don't regret it." 2 hours later, the group began to disperse. Some went to other bars, others took Ubers home. Victoria said goodbye and went out to the street, breathing the fresh night air. It was almost 11. San Francisco's streets were still alive with people, vendors, music coming from other bars. "Victoria." Emily's voice behind her made her turn. Emily was standing under a street lamp, her bag hanging from her shoulder, looking at her with uncertain eyes. "I thought you had left," Victoria said. "I was going to," Emily admitted. "But I couldn't." They stood looking at each other, the city noise around them fading into a distant murmur. "Do you want to walk?" Victoria asked. Emily nodded. They walked side by side through the streets of the Mission District, without a fixed destination, keeping a prudent distance but aware of each accidental brush of their arms. There were people around them, couples strolling, groups of friends. But for Victoria, only Emily existed. "Do you remember the first time I kissed you?" Emily asked suddenly. Victoria smiled. "It was here, in this same area, coming out of that cafe that doesn't exist anymore. I was terrified," Emily confessed. "I thought you would reject me, that you would walk away. And I thought I was dreaming," Victoria said. "I had been falling in love with you in silence for months, convincing myself it would never happen." They arrived at a small plaza with benches and trees. Emily sat on one, and Victoria sat beside her, close enough that their thighs touched. "Victoria," Emily began, "if we're going to try this, you need to know it won't be easy. My father still has contacts in this city. If he finds out, I don't care," Victoria interrupted. "I'm not 20 anymore, Emily. I'm not going to let anyone tell me who I can or can't love." "Love?" Emily repeated in a low voice, turning to look at her. Victoria held her gaze. "I never stopped loving you, not even when I thought I hated you." Emily's eyes filled with tears again. "I love you too," she whispered. "I never stopped. This time, when they kissed, it was different. There was no desperation, no urgency. Only the silent promise that this time they wouldn't let anything separate them. When they separated, Emily rested her head on Victoria's shoulder, and Victoria wrapped her arm around her. They stayed like that, in silence, while the night advanced and San Francisco lived around them. "What do we do now?" Emily asked after a long while. "Now," Victoria said. "We live, and see what happens." Emily nodded against her shoulder. "Sounds terrifying," I know, Victoria admitted. But it also sounds perfect. And in that moment, under the lights of the city that had seen them fall in love and break apart, they began again. The following weeks were a dangerous balance between professional and personal. At the office, Victoria and Emily maintained a careful distance, interacting only when necessary, always with others present. But after work, they met in discreet cafes, in parks away from downtown, in Victoria's apartment when they knew no one would see them. It was exhausting. It was risky. It was perfect. Victoria rediscovered Emily in fragments, the small scar on her left wrist from when she cut herself cooking, the way she frowned when reading something she didn't like, her genuine laugh when no one else was watching. And Emily rediscovered Victoria, her obsession with order, her occasional nightmares, the way she bit the inside of her cheek when thinking. But there were also shadows. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after they first kissed, when everything began to get complicated. Victoria was in a meeting with the CEO and other directors when her phone vibrated. It was a message from Emily. "I need to talk to you. It's urgent." Victoria felt a chill run down her spine. Emily never texted her during work hours unless it was something work-related, and she never used words like urgent. The meeting extended for 2 more hours. By the time Victoria returned to her office, it was almost 6 in the evening. Emily was at her desk, face pale and hands trembling. "What happened?" Victoria asked in a low voice as she passed by her. "In your office," Emily murmured. "Please." Once inside with the door closed, Emily collapsed in a chair, covering her face with her hands. "My father called me," she said with a broken voice. "Someone told him I'm working here, at Morrison Group." And Victoria felt as if the floor was opening beneath her feet. "What? Who?" "I don't know," Emily responded, looking up. "But he called screaming. He said if I don't resign immediately, he's going to make our relationship from 7 years ago public. He's going to tell everyone that you and I..." Her voice broke. "He's going to ruin you, Victoria, like he threatened to do back then." Victoria knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "Emily, listen to me. He has no power over us. Not anymore. Your father can't..." "Can he?" Emily let out a bitter laugh. "He knows all the important business people in the Bay Area. He has contacts in every sector. If he starts spreading rumors about you, about your sexual orientation, about our relationship, then let him," Victoria said firmly. "I'm not going to let him blackmail me, and I'm not going to let you go again." Emily looked at her with desperate eyes. "You don't understand. This isn't just about us. This affects the company, your reputation, your family. My family accepted me years ago." Victoria interrupted. "When I finally told them I'm a lesbian, my mother cried. My father was silent for a week, but in the end they hugged me and told me they loved me no matter what. The only thing they regretted was that I hadn't told them sooner." Emily blinked, surprised. "I didn't know that. There are many things you don't know," Victoria said gently, "because we didn't have time to tell each other. But Emily, listen to me. I'm not going to run. I'm not going to hide. And I'm not going to lose you again because of fear of what others might think or say." Tears rolled down Emily's cheeks. "But your job. If Morrison Group decides to fire me for who I love, then it's not a place I want to work," Victoria said. "And if your father wants to make a scandal, let him. But this time, we're going to face it together." Emily threw herself into her arms, clinging to her like a lifeline. Victoria held her tightly, burying her face in her hair, breathing her familiar scent. "I'm so scared," Emily whispered. "Me too," Victoria admitted. "But I'm more afraid of losing you again." They stayed like that for several minutes, holding each other in the office silence while outside the city began to light its night lights. Finally, Emily separated, wiping her face. "What do we do?" she asked. Victoria considered her options. They could both resign, flee to another city, start over. They could hide, keep their relationship secret indefinitely, or they could face it. "We're going to talk to your father," Victoria finally said. Emily looked at her as if she had lost her mind. What? No, Victoria, you can't be serious. Very serious, Victoria responded. We're going to go together. We're going to look him in the eyes, and we're going to tell him he no longer has power over us, that we're not going to hide or be ashamed of what we feel. He's going to... What? Victoria interrupted. Yell at us? Threaten us? He's done that before, Emily, and look where we are now. We're still here. We're still alive. We're still together. Emily closed her eyes, breathing deeply. When she opened them, there was something different in them, a spark of determination. Okay, she said. Let's do it. Emily's father, Richard Rivers, lived in a mansion in Pacific Heights, one of San Francisco's most exclusive areas. When Victoria and Emily arrived on Saturday morning, the wrought iron gate was closed. Emily pressed the intercom with trembling hands. Who is it? Barked a butler's voice. It's Emily. I'm here to speak with my father. There was a long silence. Finally, the gate began to open slowly. The mansion was imposing. 2 stories of white stone, perfectly manicured gardens, a fountain in the center of the entrance path. It reminded Victoria of a mausoleum. Beautiful, but lifeless. Richard Rivers was waiting for them at the front door. He was a tall man, with perfectly combed gray hair, a dark suit even on Saturday, and an expression of absolute contempt on his face. When he saw Victoria next to Emily, his eyes narrowed dangerously. Don't you dare bring that woman to my house, he hissed. It's your house, Dad, Emily responded, her voice surprisingly firm. But I have the right to live my life, and I came to tell you to your face. Richard let out a cold laugh. Your life? You call life wallowing with this... Careful, Victoria warned, stepping forward. Think very carefully about your next words, Mr. Rivers. Richard's eyes fixed on her with pure hatred. You ruined my daughter's life. You turned her into a... Dad, stop, Emily interrupted. No one turned me into anything. I'm a lesbian. I always have been. And I'm not going to keep pretending to be someone I'm not just to meet your expectations. You're a disgrace, Richard spat. To this family, to your name, to you, Emily completed. And there were tears in her eyes, but also strength. I'm a disgrace to you, because I can't be the perfect daughter you always wanted. The one who marries a rich man, has children, and plays the role society expects. But you know what, Dad? I don't care anymore, because I finally understood something. Your approval isn't worth my happiness. The silence that followed was absolute. Richard looked at his daughter as if she were a stranger. If you walk out that gate with her, he finally said, his voice cold as ice, don't come back. Ever. You'll be dead to me. Emily shuddered, but didn't back down. Then I guess this is goodbye, she said, her voice breaking. She turned to leave, but Victoria didn't move. She stood looking at Richard, this man who had caused so much pain, who had destroyed so much. You have no idea what you're losing, Victoria told him in a low voice. Your daughter is one of the bravest, most upright, most extraordinary people I've ever met. And the fact that you can't see that your hatred and prejudices blind you so much, that makes you the real disgrace here. Not her. Richard didn't respond. He just watched them walk away, his face a mask of impotent fury. When they reached the car, Emily broke down. She cried with deep sobs that shook her entire body, years of pain and rejection finally coming to the surface. Victoria held her, stroking her hair, whispering words of comfort. It's over, she murmured. It's over. I'm here. I'm not going to leave you. They drove in silence to Victoria's apartment. Once inside, Emily collapsed on the couch, emotionally and physically exhausted. Victoria sat beside her, taking her hand. You did incredibly well, she told her. Emily let out a bitter laugh. It doesn't feel that way. It feels like I lost my father. You lost someone who didn't accept you as you are, Victoria corrected. That's not really losing, Emily. That's freeing yourself. Emily rested her head on Victoria's shoulder. And now what? Now we live, Victoria responded, without hiding, without shame. Just us. Emily looked up at her. Do you really think we can do this, that we can be together, without everything falling apart? Victoria stroked her cheek tenderly. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, or next week, or next year, she admitted. But I know I want to try, with you. If you want to, too. Emily smiled for the first time that day. A small, fragile smile, but genuine. Yes, she whispered. I want to try. They kissed softly, sealing the promise. And in that moment, in the stillness of Victoria's apartment, with the city extending beyond the windows, they felt that finally, after 7 years, they were home. Monday arrived with a feeling of tense calm. Victoria and Emily had spent the rest of the weekend together, talking, crying, laughing, rebuilding everything the years had broken. They decided they would no longer hide, but they wouldn't make a dramatic announcement either. They would simply be. When they arrived at the office that morning, they arrived together. Not holding hands, not with obvious gestures, but together. They went up in the same elevator, walked down the same hallway, and when a colleague greeted them, both responded naturally. Sarah was the first to notice something different. Hey, Em, she said while making coffee in the office's small kitchen. You look different. I don't know, lighter somehow. Emily smiled, pouring herself her own cup. Let's just say I had a revealing weekend. Oh yeah? Sarah leaned in with curiosity. Did you meet someone? Emily looked toward Victoria's office, visible through the glass. Victoria was on the phone, but their eyes met for a second. A small, almost imperceptible smile crossed both their lips. Something like that, Emily responded. What they didn't know was that David Foster, the human resources manager, had been observing. For weeks he had noticed the glances, the loaded silences, the tension between the new director and her assistant. And that Monday, when he saw them arrive together, something clicked in his mind. David was a conservative man, of traditional values, who believed the office should maintain certain standards. And what he was suspecting seemed to him inappropriate. Mid-afternoon, he knocked on Victoria's office door. Ms. Hayes, do you have a moment? Victoria looked up from her computer. Sure, David. Come in. David closed the door behind him and sat across from the desk. His body language was rigid, uncomfortable. I've come to discuss a delicate matter, he began. Victoria felt her skin prickle. What's this about? It's about your relationship with Ms. Rivers. The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria kept her expression carefully neutral, but her heart was beating like a drum. I'm not sure I understand what you're referring to, she said calmly. David cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Ms. Hayes, I've noticed certain closeness between you that seems inappropriate for a professional relationship. And I must remind you that the company has policies about relationships between superiors and subordinates. Victoria felt anger beginning to boil in her chest, but kept it under control. Are you accusing me of something specific, David? It's not an accusation, he hurried to say. It's just a concern. As human resources manager, it's my duty to ensure that— To ensure what? Victoria interrupted, her voice cold. That two women don't relate beyond work? That no one in this office has a personal life you don't approve of? David paled. It's not about that. It's about maintaining professionalism and nothing. Victoria cut off, standing from her chair. My personal life is none of your business, David. Unless you have concrete evidence that my work performance has been compromised, which we both know isn't the case, this conversation is completely out of line. Ms. Hayes, please understand I'm only trying to protect the company's interests. The company's interests? Victoria let out a bitter laugh. Or your own prejudices. David stood up, clearly offended. I don't have prejudices. I simply believe certain things should be kept private, And Mr. Foster, Victoria interrupted, her voice now glacial. This conversation is over, and I suggest you review the company's non-discrimination policies before making insinuations about my personal life again. Because believe me, if it happens again, I won't hesitate to take this to the CEO. David opened his mouth to respond, but closed it again. With a flushed face, he left the office, slamming the door. Victoria dropped into her chair, trembling. She knew this was just the beginning. Once suspicions began to circulate, it would be a matter of time before the entire office knew. Emily entered moments later, face pale. I saw David leave furious. What happened? Victoria told her everything. Emily covered her face with her hands. Oh God, this is exactly what I feared. Now he's not going to do anything, Victoria said firmly, because we haven't done anything wrong. And if he tries to turn this into a scandal, I'm going straight to Robert. Robert Morrison? Emily looked at her incredulously. The CEO? Yes, Victoria picked up her phone. In fact, I'm going to request a meeting with him right now. Victoria, wait, but Victoria was already dialing the extension. Robert's secretary answered. Good morning. This is Victoria Hayes. I need an urgent meeting with Mr. Morrison. Yes, it's important. Tomorrow first thing? Perfect. Thank you. She hung up and looked at Emily. We're going to get ahead of this. We're going to control the narrative. Emily looked terrified. What if he fires us? Then we'll get jobs somewhere else, Victoria responded. But I'm not going to let us become office gossip. I'm not going to hide as if what we feel is something shameful. Emily breathed deeply and nodded. Okay. Let's do it. The meeting with Robert Morrison was scheduled for 8 o'clock Tuesday morning. Victoria barely slept that night, mentally rehearsing what she would say, how she would say it. Emily stayed with her, the two lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, holding hands. Whatever happens tomorrow, Emily whispered in the darkness, I want you to know I don't regret anything. Victoria turned to look at her. Me neither. They kissed softly, as if that kiss could protect them from what was coming. At exactly 8 o'clock, Victoria knocked on the CEO's office door. Robert Morrison was a man who inspired respect. Elegant, intelligent, with a reputation for being fair, but demanding. Victoria, come in, he said with a smile. What's so urgent? Victoria sat across from him, hands clasped on her lap. Mr. Morrison, I came to talk to you about a personal matter that could become a professional problem if not handled appropriately. Robert raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Victoria took a deep breath. Emily Rivers, my executive assistant, and I have a relationship. A romantic relationship. The silence that followed seemed to extend for an eternity. Robert looked at her without expression, processing the information. I see, he finally said. And is this affecting your work performance? No, Victoria responded firmly. Not at all. I've met all my objectives, projects are on time and within budget, and my results speak for themselves. And Ms. Rivers's performance? It's impeccable. It always has been. Robert leaned back in his chair, considering. Why are you telling me this now? Victoria decided to be completely honest. Because yesterday, Mr. Foster came to my office to make insinuations about our relationship, and I preferred to get ahead of any rumors or misunderstandings before this becomes a bigger problem. Robert nodded slowly. I appreciate your honesty, Victoria, and I also appreciate your work. You've done excellent things in the few weeks you've been here. He paused. But I have to be frank with you. This could cause discomfort in some sectors of the company. I know, Victoria admitted, but I also know that Morrison Group has non-discrimination policies, and that my personal life shouldn't be a factor in my professional evaluation. You're right, Robert agreed. It shouldn't. But we live in America, Victoria, and although legally you're completely right, you know as well as I do that reality is more complicated. Victoria felt a knot forming in her stomach. Are you asking me to end my relationship? No, Robert responded quickly. I have no right to ask you that, but I do have to ask you to keep things professional within the office. No public displays of affection, no favoritism, nothing that could give rise to accusations of nepotism or inappropriate conduct. We were already doing that, Victoria said. Good. Robert stood and extended his hand. Then, I don't see any problem. Your work is excellent, and as long as that continues, your personal life is exactly that. Personal. Victoria shook his hand, feeling immense relief. Thank you, Mr. Morrison. You don't know how much this means. Victoria, Robert said before she left, I'll talk to David. His concerns are out of place, and I'll make it clear that any form of discrimination in this company will not be tolerated. Victoria nodded, with tears of gratitude in her eyes. When she left the office, Emily was waiting in the hallway, face pale with anxiety. Victoria smiled. Everything's fine, she murmured. Emily exhaled a sigh of relief so deep it seemed she had been holding her breath for hours. The news spread through the office like wildfire. By the end of the week, everyone knew about Victoria and Emily. Reactions were mixed. Some colleagues smiled at them supportively. Others looked at them with uncomfortable curiosity. And a few clearly disapproved but said nothing directly. Sarah was one of the first to approach Emily. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. But she was smiling. I love it. You two look so good together. Mark, the analyst who had made inappropriate comments at the bar, apologized awkwardly. I'm sorry if I said something that made you uncomfortable. I didn't know that. Well, you know. You don't have to apologize for not knowing, Victoria responded graciously. Just make sure to be respectful now that you do. David Foster avoided them completely. After an apparently tense conversation with Robert, he had backed off. But the tension was still there every time they coincided in a meeting. But the most surprising thing came on Friday afternoon. Victoria received a call from an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Hello? Victoria. It was a voice she hadn't heard in years. Jennifer, her older sister. I need to see you. It's about Mom. Victoria's heart skipped a beat. What happened? Is she okay? She's fine, but someone told her about you and Emily, and she's confused. She wants to talk to you. Victoria closed her eyes. Her mother, Margaret Hayes, was a traditional but loving woman. When Victoria had told her about her sexuality years ago, it had taken time to process, but she had finally accepted it. But this was different. This was Emily. The same Emily who had disappeared 7 years ago, leaving Victoria devastated. Okay, Victoria finally said. I'll come on Sunday. She hung up and looked at Emily, who had heard the entire conversation. Do you want me to go with you? Emily asked. Victoria considered the offer. Part of her wanted Emily to be there, but another part knew this conversation had to be just between her and her mother. Better if I go alone first, she said. But thank you. Emily nodded with understanding. On Sunday, Victoria drove to her mother's house in Marin County. It was a beautiful Victorian home, with interior patios and roses climbing the walls. Margaret was waiting for her in the living room, with a cup of tea in her hands and a serious expression. Hi, Mom, Victoria said, kissing her cheek. Sit down, honey. Victoria sat, preparing for the worst. I heard you're dating Emily Rivers again, Margaret said without preamble. The same girl who broke your heart 7 years ago. Yes, Victoria admitted. But Mom, things weren't as they seemed. She didn't leave me because she wanted to. Her father forced her. Margaret looked at her with tired eyes. And now? What changed? We're not the same anymore, Victoria responded. We're not 20 anymore. We're not willing to let others decide for us. Margaret sighed, setting her cup on the table. Victoria, my love, I only want you to be happy. And if Emily makes you happy, then I support you. But I'm also your mother, and I can't help worrying that you'll get hurt again. I know, Mom, Victoria said gently. I'm scared too, but I love her. And this time, I'm going to fight for what I want. Margaret extended her hand and Victoria took it. Then bring her to dinner. I want to meet her properly, not as your assistant, but as your partner. Victoria felt tears welling up. Really? Really? Margaret smiled. And tell her to prepare her stomach. I'm making pot roast. Victoria laughed through tears, hugging her mother. That night, Victoria told Emily about the conversation. Emily cried with relief and joy. Your mom wants to meet me, she whispered, incredulous. She wants to meet you, Victoria confirmed, as my partner, as someone important in my life. Emily kissed her deeply. I love you, she murmured against her lips. I love you so much. I love you too. And in that moment, with San Francisco shining beyond the windows, they felt that finally, after all the pain and losses, they were building something real, something no one could take from them. Spring, 2033. Golden Gate Park was in full bloom. Cherry blossoms painted the sky pink, their flowers falling like snow over the paths. It was a perfect April Saturday, with bright sun but not too hot, with families strolling and children running among the trees. Victoria and Emily walked hand in hand down the path they had walked so many times before. They were now 41, with some gray hairs showing in their hair, with small wrinkles around their eyes from so much laughter. But they still looked at each other the same way they had at 24. Do you remember the first time we came here? Emily asked, squeezing Victoria's hand. Like it was yesterday, Victoria responded with a smile. You were so nervous you tripped over your own feet. That's because you were looking at me that way, Emily protested, laughing. What way? Like I was the only person in the world. Victoria stopped and turned Emily toward her. Because to me you were, and you still are. They kissed softly, not caring who saw them. They had learned long ago that love wasn't something to be ashamed of, but something to celebrate. The last 7 years had been complex, beautiful, but complex. Victoria had risen to vice president of Morrison Group. Emily had decided to go back to college and finish her degree in psychology, and now worked at a community clinic helping LGBT+ youth facing family rejection. Emily's father had kept his promise. He never spoke to her again. But Emily had found a family in Victoria's mother and sister who had welcomed her as one of their own. They had moved in together to an apartment in the Castro district. They had adopted 2 cats. They had traveled to Europe last year. They had had fights, reconciliations, sleepless nights and mornings of laughter. They had built a life. 6 months ago, Victoria had proposed to her in this very place, under the cherry blossoms. Emily had cried so much it took 5 minutes to be able to say yes. Now they both wore engagement rings that sparkled under the spring sun. The wedding is in 2 months, Emily said as they sat on a bench. Are you nervous? Terrified, Victoria admitted with a smile. But excited. You? The same. Emily rested her head on Victoria's shoulder. Sometimes I still can't believe we're here, after everything we went through. Me neither, Victoria murmured, kissing her hair. But we're here, and we're going to be here for a long time. A group of teenagers ran past, 2 girls holding hands, laughing without worry. Emily watched them with a sad smile. I wonder if they realize how lucky they are, she said in a low voice, to be able to love each other openly without so much fear. Maybe not now, Victoria responded, but someday they will, and they'll appreciate that people like us fought so they could have that freedom. Emily looked up at her. Do you think we made a difference? I know we did, Victoria said with certainty. Every time we didn't hide, every time we told the truth, every time we refused to be ashamed. We made a difference, even if it was small. They stayed like that for a long while, watching the world move around them. Families, couples, friends, all living their own stories. And they, finally, living theirs without fear. Victoria, Emily said suddenly. Yes? Thank you for not giving up on me, for fighting, for waiting. Victoria took her face in her hands, looking at her with an intensity that still made Emily's heart race. Emily Rivers, I would have waited my whole life for you. and I would do it again without hesitation. They kissed under the cherry blossoms, under the same sky that had seen them fall in love, separate, and find each other again. And as the pink flowers fell around them like blessings, they knew their story, with all its pains and triumphs, had been worth every second. Because in the end, love is always worth it, especially when it's real. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share this video. Because stories like this need to be told, need to be heard, and need to remind us that love, in all its forms, is the bravest thing we can choose. See you in the next story. Until then.